is The World This Weekend. Hello, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Coming up, cleanup is underway in the Maritimes in the wake of post-tropical storm Lee.
We didn't have to use the preparation that we had for the worst, for sure.
Also, Ottawa gears up for the fall sitting of Parliament with housing and the cost of living crisis at the top of the agenda.
Our focus is really going to be about affordability and public safety. We've taken measures, but there's more that we need to do.
And why the Philippines says Canada has a stake in the future of the South China Sea as relations between China and its neighbors grow tense.
We cannot afford our territory, any encroachment of our territory any further.
That's later, but first. Tens of thousands of people in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick are without power following post-tropical storm Lee. Along the storm's path, hydro crews are working around the clock to repair toppled lines. Lee also took out trees and washed out roads. But as Shayna Luck reports, officials say the storm could have been much more destructive.
At his family's Halifax convenience store, Nick Habib is doing a roaring business in pizza and treats, powered by 2 gas generators.
We've got ice cream for the people, we've got some cold beverages, we've got ice.
Last year during Hurricane Fiona, he had only 1 generator, and it wasn't enough.
So during Fiona, we lost all our ice cream, we lost all our dairy.
And over the noise of their generators, they barely noticed the storm last night.
We weren't able to hear anything. It was a shock when we saw all the branches outside because it didn't feel like much.
Many Maritimers had the same reaction today, including Danny Muse, the warden of the district of Argyll. His community in Nova Scotia's southwest tip was expecting to take the brunt of it, but there's much less damage than expected.
You expect it, but you prepare for the worst, but we didn't have to use the preparation that we had for the worst, for sure.
There was some damage. Trees and branches came down on power lines, leaving tens of thousands without power. But crews are making quick work of the restorations. Jason Mew is with Nova Scotia's Emergency Management Office.
We certainly had trees falling on power lines, but we didn't necessarily have power poles snapping in half.
That's why he says this restoration is simpler than last year's.
But a lot easier to put the lines back up with a tree and not have to replace hundreds of poles. So that's one of the reasons why it should go a lot faster.
Lee cut across the Bay of Fundy to New Brunswick, causing some flooding and even bringing down the canopy of a gas station in New Maryland. But by Sunday morning, St. John Mayor Donna Reardon was out snapping pictures of large trees that fell in the downtown area.
Yes, we were anticipating more damage. The tropical storm status, the rain and wind status was all downgraded at midnight last night. So, that was a relief.
The power crews got to Nick Habib's neighborhood on Sunday afternoon. But he's not sorry they spent the money on another generator for the convenience store.
It's a big price to pay up front, but in the long run, it's going to be worth a lot. These generators are going to last a long time, and there's many more storms and power outages to come.
A reminder that hurricane season is not over until November. Shayna Luck, CBC News, Halifax.
Summer break is over in Ottawa. Parliament resumes tomorrow for its fall sitting, and there are 2 issues on the minds of many Canadians that are expected to be front and centre: housing and cost of living. JP Tasker looks ahead to what's in store as MPs return to the House of Commons.
Justin Trudeau has caused this housing hell.
The Conservative leader is ready to pounce on the Prime Minister when Parliament returns. Pierre Poilievre has been hounding the government for its perceived failures.
After 8 years of Justin Trudeau, everything costs more. Work doesn't pay. Housing costs have doubled.
And it's paid off. Poll aggregator 338 Canada suggests the Conservatives have opened up a 9-point lead nationwide over the governing Liberals. With numbers like that, Poilievre is staying laser-focused on affordability issues, touting a bill that rewards federal cash to communities that build more homes.
My plan says to the cities, I don't care how you do it. Just do it.
The government, meanwhile, is trying to play catch-up. Government House Leader Karina Gould says Ottawa will respond to Poilievre's criticisms about the cost of living and crime.
We've taken measures, they've helped, but there's more that we need to do.
And Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is trying to knock the Tory leader down a peg, telling a conference of progressive leaders in Montreal the populists like Poilievre have few meaningful solutions.
They positively relish leaning into the gloom, don't they? Their everything is broken pitch can be seductive when people are tired, prices are high, and mortgage renewals are looming.
But there's an acknowledgement that some things aren't as they should be. A plan to drop the GST on new rental home construction is part of a Liberal push to course correct. The government is also taking on Canada's grocery chains. They want companies like Loblaw and Sobeys to drive down food prices or face some sort of tax on profits. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is on board.
It's time to say enough is enough.
He'll introduce a bill Monday that, if passed, would levy fines on price gougers. Poilievre's already skeptical.
This is more political theater. Justin Trudeau is an actor. What we actually need is action.
The CEOs of the country's largest grocers have been called to Ottawa for a meeting this week. Retailers insist there's nothing more they can do. But with Poilievre hot on the Liberals' trail, the government wants to be seen as doing something. JP Tasker, CBC News, Ottawa.
The federal government is also facing calls to do more to protect migrant workers in this country, with protests in 16 Canadian cities today demanding Ottawa take action. Workers say they face abuse and exploitation and fear speaking out. Today's marches come after a recent statement from a UN expert comparing Canada's temporary foreign worker program to modern-day slavery. For Con reports.
We are fighting for regularization for all undocumented people.
Around 3,000 people marched through downtown Toronto. Protesters are demanding permanent residence for foreign workers and an end to inhumane working conditions.
I have been spat at. I have been pushed by clients that have gone to give services.
Jane came from Uganda as a refugee 6 years ago. She did not give her last name as she is undocumented. She says work is hard to find, and when she does work, the pay is often below minimum wage. She faces racist abuse, but doesn't know how to defend herself.
My mom is sick. I don't know if I ever get to see her again because I don't have status in this country. If he grants us status for all, then we are able to reunite with our families.
Many of those marching today came to Canada as part of the temporary foreign worker program. Earlier this month, a UN official called that program a breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery. Tomoya Obokata is the UN Special Rapporteur.
And when I heard stories from migrant workers themselves, in some cases, the degree of control I found was quite severe. So, for example, they were prohibited from going outside of their housing, and there's excessive surveillance, physical violence.
Obokata says many temporary foreign workers are reluctant to report abuse. They could face deportation if they lose their work permits.
We all want to live in a fair society, and a fair society is simply one in which everybody has the same rights.
Sarom Ro is with Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and one of the march organizers.
Every day of delay has meant more exploitation at work, abuse, denial of life-saving health care, as well as fear of deportation and family separation.
As Parliament gets back to work tomorrow, marchers hope their voices will be heard in Ottawa. Furqan Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
The United Nations envoy to Libya arrived in the city of Derna on Saturday. Abdoulaye Bathily says the visit aims to assess the damage from a powerful storm that broke 2 dams and flooded the city last week.
We came here today to look on what is going on the ground, of course to meet with people, the survivors, those who are affected directly with this disaster, and also to interact with our teams on the ground. We are in an emergency, we have to go and to see them so that they will tell us what needs to be done.
The UN estimates more than 11,000 people have died and at least 10,000 are missing as a result of the floods. At least another 40,000 people have been displaced. Agencies and charities have been severing ties with the British comedian and TV host Russell Brand after accusations of rape, sexual assault and emotional abuse were made against him in a joint investigation by several UK media outlets. Brand is denying the allegations, which are graphic and disturbing. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports.
In his first public appearance at his sold-out comedy show in London, Russell Brand did not directly address the allegations, which have now triggered investigations and sparked intense backlash.
I was like, oh my God, he raped me.
4 women spoke with multiple British news outlets.
He's like, you're like my little dolly.
Including The Times, The Sunday Times, and the Channel 4 TV network, detailing claims of sexual assault, rape, and emotional abuse, allegedly taking place between the UK and Los Angeles between 2006 and 2013. One of the alleged victims says she was 16 when their relationship started. To protect the identity of the women, actors were hired to share some of their stories in a documentary that aired Saturday.
He pushed me up against the wall. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm telling him to get off me, and he won't get off.
During this time period, Brand was a high-profile radio host at the BBC and Channel 4. He starred in Hollywood movies and was briefly married to singer Katy Perry. Brand is denying the allegations in a brief video he posted on social media.
As I've written about extensively in my books, I was very, very promiscuous. Now, during that time of promiscuity, the relationships I had were absolutely always consensual.
Police in London did not mention Brand by name, but said they are aware of the allegations, and investigators have reached out to the news outlets to ensure any potential victim knows how to go about telling authorities.
Russell Brand, including the BBC.
The BBC has launched an internal investigation, as has Channel 4 and another production company, while a women's charity has cut ties with Brand. The Sunday Times media editor Rosamund Irwin says these kinds of rumors had been known within the industry for years.
I think the coming days we will see a lot more scrutiny of, and including in our paper, of who knew what when.
Brand is now a self-described wellness guru who has more than 6 million subscribers on his YouTube channel, where he indulges in conspiracy theories, chatting with prominent right-wing voices, including former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. In this moment, it's those figures who are getting behind him, with messages of support from Elon Musk and Alex Jones. Katie Simpson, CBC News, London, Ontario.
Canada's ties with India are showing signs of strain. At the G20 summit last week, Prime Ministers Justin Trudeau and Narendra Modi appeared at odds. And now Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy is suffering a major blow, with trade talks being put on hold. CBC's South Asia correspondent Salima Shivji digs into what's behind the frosty relations.
His Excellency Mr. Justin Trudeau.
The greetings at the G20 between Canada's Prime Minister and his Indian counterpart Narendra Modi were seen by most observers as short and perfunctory. Justin Trudeau skipped the official gala dinner without an official reason. Less than a week later, Canada's International Trade Minister Mary Ng cancelled an upcoming trade mission to India, seen as key to strengthening ties in the Indo-Pacific region. Trade talks are also paused. In Delhi last Sunday, Trudeau and Modi had a brief chat on the sidelines of the summit. Trudeau's version:
there's all sorts of different issues, and we've had serious and frank conversations, as Canadians would expect.
Differs from the Indian government's account. A stern press release focused on one issue, saying Prime Minister Modi conveyed, quote, strong concerns about continuing anti-India activities of extremist elements in Canada. That same day in Surrey, BC, an informal non-binding vote was held by the US-based Sikhs for Justice, which is banned in India, on whether there should be an independent Sikh homeland called Khalistan. It's one of several votes the group has organized over the last year in Canada and elsewhere. The Modi government has been vocal about calling out what it sees as Canada's lax attitude in dealing with the Khalistan movement. As for Canada, national security officials have said India is a top source of foreign interference in the country. And Trudeau did bring up that issue in his short meeting with Modi.
I guess it's not a great relationship.
Former advisor to India's Foreign Affairs Ministry Ashok Malik, who now works for consulting firm The Asia Group, says the tense relations linger from Trudeau's widely criticized 2018 visit to India.
It was quite clear in that visit that he was only here for domestic political posturing.
Malik says Indian officials would like to see more sensitivity from Trudeau.
If he values the Indian relationship enough, there is the expectation that he will go the extra mile to alleviate and answer genuine Indian concerns about possible violence, about possible radicalism.
With next month's trade mission to Mumbai next, Canadian officials are now switching their focus to an upcoming Japan trip. But a strained relationship with India threatens to leave a hole in Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, with a diplomatic chill that might be hard to overcome. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has visited the Italian island of Lampedusa, which is struggling with a huge surge in migrants arriving by boat.
Prime Minister Meloni and I are here today to offer a coordinated response by the Italian and European authorities.
More than 8,000 migrants have landed on Lampedusa in the last week, more than the island's permanent population. Von der Leyen has promised a 10-point action plan to help Italy deal with this situation. It includes greater surveillance of migrant boats, increasing access to legal channels for migrants, and cracking down on human traffickers.
We will decide who comes to the European Union and under what circumstances, and not the smugglers and traffickers.
Curbing migrant crossings is a cornerstone of Giorgia Meloni's political platform. Today, the Italian PM said the best solution is to prevent departures from North Africa and reiterated calls for an EU naval blockade of the Mediterranean Sea. Normalization talks between Serbia and Kosovo broke down this week. The two former foes have maintained an uneasy peace for years, but relations soured this spring after a dispute over Serbian license plates and the results of mayoral elections in Kosovo. The European Union's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, says if there is no de-escalation, both countries will be blocked from EU membership.
Without normalization, there will not be a European future for either Kosovo or Serbia. Kosovo and Serbia are risking to be left behind when other regional partners are moving quicker towards Europe.
Natalie Carney takes a look at the long simmering ethnic tensions between Kosovo and Serbia.
77-year-old Andrevic Miodrag lives in Gračanica, a village just south of Kosovo's capital, Pristina. He is ethnically Serb and has lived in his house since he was born. He has only known division in his country.
I fix tractors for Albanians. They come here, we work together as far as that is concerned, but that's all. There is no socializing. There is no cooperation.
Those divisions go back centuries and were enhanced by the 1999 NATO bombing of southern Serbia and northern Kosovo during the Balkan War. Last December, tensions erupted when the government attempted to force the Serb minority to change car plates dating from before 1999, when Kosovo was still part of Serbia. Then again in April, after ethnic Serbs boycotted mayoral elections and ethnic Albanian mayors were appointed to 4 Serb-majority areas. This disunity in the country worries Labinat Islami, who is Albanian.
Albanians cannot accept division. When we think of what Kosovo has gone through, we cannot come to terms with the division and separation of one part of Kosovo. Division is not the solution.
The distrust of the government to Pristina runs so deep amongst Serbs that cancer patient Lazar Danish drives hours to Niš, Serbia, for treatment. He says there's not enough available medicine and other healthcare services for Serbs like him in Kosovo.
The biggest problem is the politicians, Albanian politicians, who justify their inability to provide better living conditions for all citizens by saying that Serbs have these privileges. We are not recognized.
While Serbs and Albanians remain locked in conflict, other ethnic and religious communities are caught in the crossfire, such as the Gorani. This small Muslim population of only 60,000 has lived in the Gora region of southwest Kosovo, right on the border with Albania, for centuries. But Yasin Kasami Jawad says they are always feeling pressured to choose sides.
We adapt to the people wherever we go. But any situation in Serbia affects us. Everyone supports my home state of Serbia, but there are people who live here because of fear, and they think Pristina is right.
Back in Gračanica, Andrevic Miodrag worries about future generations.
Why is the generation divided? It's less socializing, because now, unfortunately, at schools, they're separated. And there is no communication.
Since it claimed independence in 2008, around 117 countries have come to recognize Kosovo as a country, including Canada. Several others, however, have not, including Russia, China, and 5 EU countries. Natalie Carney for CBC News, Belgrade.
The South China Sea is once again a source of tension between China and its neighbors. Beijing recently released a new map claiming ownership of an area the size of India that stretches all the way to the territorial waters of neighbors like the Philippines. That country is calling China's claims a form of control and occupation. And in an exclusive interview, the Philippines Defense Secretary says the claims are Canada's problem too. The CBC's David Common reports from Manila.
You're within Philippine exclusive economic zone.
Yet another confrontation at sea between China and the Philippines over a tiny speck of land in the middle of the strategically key South China Sea, an area the size of India. China claims to own nearly all of it and routinely sends its Navy and Coast Guard to harass neighboring nations.
We cannot afford our territory, any encroachment of our territory any further.
We met the Philippines Secretary of Defense, Gilberto Teodoro, as his nation grapples with China's growing assertiveness, ignoring an international tribunal which ruled against China's claims.
If China's claims are given credence, freedom of navigation and freedom of air traffic, international air traffic is jeopardized.
That's because $4 trillion of global commerce moves through the South China Sea each year, whether grain grown in Canada or Amazon products built in Asia. If China were to control the sea, it could choose to decide who gets to use it. And now with the world's largest navy, it has a growing capability to do so.
It's an expansionist power at this point in time.
Political analyst Renato de Castro says the Philippines has had to shift from rapprochement with China to seeing it as a competitor.
China will have none of this. China wanted basically simple subjugation.
The Philippines has historically had a strong connection with the United States, but the former government of Rodrigo Duterte began to shift into Beijing's orbit in the hopes of finding common ground. But those plans were abandoned 2 years ago.
China simply pushed this current administration to the waiting arms of the United States.
That now sees the Philippines growing its cooperation with the U.S. military. Large-scale exercises are one component. Another, giving American ships, sailors, and soldiers access to Filipino army bases and naval ports. 2 Canadian Navy ships are now visiting the Philippines after transiting the South China Sea in a message to China. The Philippines defense chief wants that to continue and says we have a stake.
So Canada, what if sea lanes are blocked? Then even your supply chains are going to suffer.
Perhaps the most visible example of China's claims is on Mischief Reef. It was barely a ring-shaped sandbar, but over many years, China has built it up, reclaiming sand from the ocean and building a sprawling military outpost and airport, putting its forces right in the middle of the South China Sea. David Common, CBC News, Manila.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. You can listen to this program anytime on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC News YouTube channel. Film lovers have bid adieu to the Toronto International Film Festival until next year. TIFF closed with its awards ceremony this morning. The top award went to American Fiction, a satire of the publishing industry starring Jeffrey Wright. And the Best Canadian Feature award was handed to Solo, a romantic drama about a young drag queen in Montreal. As Eli Glasner tells us, Solo is just one part of a new wave of French-language films to make a splash at TIFF.
Vous admettez qu'il était jaloux?
No, I don't know. No.
A suspected murderer on trial. A conductor looking for harmony. And a drama set in Montreal's drag scene. The movies are Anatomy of a Fall, Days of Happiness, and Solo. each different but all signs of French-language cinema that is a consistent commercial and critical success. The majority of films made in Canada are in English, but pound for pound French-language films get bigger budgets and bring home more at the box office. Film critic Elijah Barron isn't surprised.
French-Canadian film has always, from the beginning, been Canada's most valued cinematic export in the world. You can think of old classics like Mon Oncle Antoine, and you still see that legacy today with French-Canadian films being produced on very different scales.
Of course, in Canada, what protects Quebec's film sector is language.
None of our lives can matter more than this mission.
I don't accept that. Not having to worry about losing French-speaking fans to the likes of Tom Cruise helps, but the language barrier also helps retain talent. Sophie Desmarais is the star of Days of Happiness.
Because we don't speak English that well, like me, we cannot go anywhere else, really. So everybody stays there, and we can create all together. So I think we have very, very good technicians.
And while movies from Quebec and France have distinct differences, they both enjoy an industry where the director truly calls the shots. Justine Trier, the director of the much-talked-about Anatomy of a Fall, explains with the help of a translator.
It's an industry, but it's also an art, and hopefully that will persist. And also the function of the director as an author, as somebody who is present for the entirety of the film process, and so the passion that goes into each one of them.
Chloe Robichaud, the director of Days of Happiness, agrees.
I'm not forced to do something a way or another. They trust my process. And maybe that's why our films are, I don't know, there's a signature to them.
Speaking on the red carpet, she says she'd like to see more Canadian filmmakers watching and learning from each other.
Yeah, I think that's too bad, and I think that's something that we should look to make a change, because it's like there's no conversation between French Canada and English Canada.
Can I just start everybody right here for me, please?
At TIFF, solo director Sophie Dupuis says audiences are kickstarting the conversation.
They're open to see new stuff, and even from director they don't know yet. So it's really it's a very good moment to meet.
As the new wave of French films takes center stage. Eli Glassner, CBC News, Toronto.
Oh, come on, Barbie, let's go party, 'cause I'm in a Barbie world.
Disturbing, isn't it? Johnny Cash with an unsettling rendition of Aqua's Barbie Girl. Fake, of course. Just one of many examples of AI-generated vocal cloning currently floating around the internet. It sounds like just a bit of fun, but lately it's gone further. In April, Drake and The Weeknd seemingly released this new song. Except they had nothing to do with it. It was made by a mysterious producer called Ghostwriter, who says they used AI to create vocal realistic clips. A fake Drake.
All I know is you could have had the world, yeah, you were my world.
Nevertheless, the song became a massive hit, racking up more than 15 million TikTok views before it was taken down. It was also submitted for a Grammy, which led to a lot of speculation until this ruling.
It's not eligible for Grammy consideration.
That's Recording Academy CEO Harvey Mason Jr. on Instagram.
Let me be extra clear. Even though it was written by a human creator, the vocals were not legally obtained. The vocals were not cleared by the label or the artist, and the song is not commercially available, and because of that, it's not eligible.
Now, the Juno Awards have decided the same, introducing new eligibility rules that say AI can be used in a song, but not as the sole or core component. But it's only getting messier from here, every answer leading to more questions, like what happens when an artist is fully on board with a fake. Vancouver's Grimes is encouraging it, creating her own AI software so anyone can use her voice as long as they split the royalties with her. Here's what Australian producer Keto has come up with. We'll leave you with more of this AI creation called Cold Touch. This has been The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Thanks for listening.